Welcome back, fellow patriots, to Patriots of the American Republic. I am Carlos, and I am here with my brother Saul. It's going to help me kick off the night and talk about some really important topics that are happening in our country right now.
Hello and good evening, fellow patriots of the American Republic. Excited to be here. Looking forward to this segment and this episode. Thank you, Carlos. Let's go ahead and make it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we want to welcome any new subscribers. There's been a couple of subscribers that have come onto the channel this week, so we wanted to welcome them. Hopefully you guys will like the content. Getting into our evening, right? Ever since I started this channel, we've had a number of scheduled topics that we have wanted to talk about each time we record. And due to the events that took place last week, we will actually have to interrupt those scheduled topics to discuss something that's important and going on right now in the moment. So August 8th of 2022, an unprecedented event where the FBI obtained a search warrant and raided former President Trump's Mar-a-largo estate was obtained and conducted on that day. Now, we're not going to get into the specifics. We're not legal experts. We're also not constitutional experts. We're just people giving our opinion and viewing the optics of what's going on. But we will discuss our views and our opinions based on what we know thus far. So I do want to make that point. We are not legal experts. I've seen discussions on both sides of the spectrum, each playing their case. As we discussed in a previous episode regarding fake news, one of the best friends that we have to determine what's fake and what's not has been time. I don't know if time in this case will be a good factor, but we must give time for the events to take place, search to go on, and obviously the legal battle on both sides of the spectrum to determine what is true and what is not true. What I will say right now is, based on the events that we've had throughout the past 6-7 years, there's a term that we could possibly use as presidential harassment. Saul, what do you think about the term presidential harassment? And be it the fact that Trump is not the president anymore, can we just say harassment in general?
Most definitely, Carlos. I mean, the presidential harassment that he did live through during his presidency, it was evident. So obviously at this point, him being an ex-president, it is a continued harassment on his constitutional rights and his freedom. So going back, Carlos, if you think about it, an audience, the whole complex and the entire system, the entire deep state and the Democrat machine, they were spying on the Trump campaign even before his actual election of 2016. So they were spying on his presidential campaign. Basically, the left-wing media at that moment, they denied it and they said that those were conspiracy theories by Trump and his supporters. They were actually framing him and trying to spy him by bugging his phones. They were spying on the Trump Tower in New York. And again, this is according to the Federalist.com. This is pretty much already news out there. And at that moment, the entire system kept denying this reality. So it was confirmed that the Trump Tower was bugged by the system. They were spying on him during his entire candidacy for presidency of 2016. So the harassment for Trump has begun ever since he came down on those stairs with Melania.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm going to go ahead and share our screen because you're absolutely right. The funny thing is how they dismissed the claim when Trump said that he was being spied on. They dismissed it, and I'm not going to criticize them a whole lot at the beginning because they dismissed it in the sense that he just basically made the claim without any type of proof or evidence, and I get that to a certain extent. However, they really should have dug a little bit deeper, and they really should have questioned, well, was he? I mean, why is he making these allegations? Ask him, Mr. President Trump, why are you making these accusations? Why are you saying that you were spied on? Then let him talk. But that's not what they did. And when they did ask him, they completely denied it. They said, sir, there's no such evidence. You're making unfounded accusations and so on and so forth.
Bogus claims of spying on the president's campaign.
Trump's spy claims.
Debunked conspiracy theory.
People come to QAnon through things like 9/11 trutherism, the Barack Obama birth certificate conspiracy theory, the Trump Spygate stuff.
But as we can see here, as you mentioned on the Federalist, right, and this was written on February 14th of this year, Special counsel, Democrats framed and spied on Trump while he was president. Not only was he spied on during his campaign, but he was also spied on afterwards as he was president. I don't know about you, but gosh, to me on the surface, that would be treasonous, and I'm not saying that hyperbolically. What do you think, Saul?
Most definitely, and again, in my opinion, definitely this could be a treasonous action, because when have we ever seen again, Carlos and audience, that a presidential candidate has been spied on by the outgoing White House? That already should turn a red siren, a big alarm. It should be a red flag to the entire population, to the entire news media. But again, we already know that the left, that the news media, especially the ones that are covering for the leftist Marxist Democrats, they're pretty much unarmed to the Democratic Party. They go along with what the Democrats want them to say, I want them to spew out. So we already know that even back then, they were trying to play defense and deny these allegations that this was absolutely crazy. And in fact, it was found that it was actually happening. So it's pretty concerning, Carlos. I mean, if you think about it, anyone on any side of the political spectrum, if you think that it's okay to be spying on a presidential candidate and bugging his phones and his towers, that's scary. That's something that, again, challenges the freedom of a true democracy. And that's something that, regimes like Cuba, Venezuela, China, Russia, communist, totalitarian parties and regiments like that would do. So it's really sad and unfortunate that the administration by Barack Hussein Obama and the entire leftist Marxist Democrat Party, they went along with this. It's really scary.
Yeah, it really is. And the fact that it's now known that this happened and really nothing. What is the consequence? Let me ask you there. What's been the consequence of this? Because I for sure haven't seen any consequences.
No consequences whatsoever, unfortunately. Imagine if this would have been a Republican White House, an outgoing Republican White House, bugging or spying on an incoming Democrat. Again, if the question would have been flipped, it would have been a complete chaos and complete news all over the place, and rightfully so, like it should be. But again, it just goes back to show you, Carlos and ladies and gentlemen, of the hypocrisy by the leftist, Marxist, rigged news media, that they always protect the Democrat establishment and the Democrat machine, the globalist machine, basically, because that's what they are. They're Marxist globalists, in my opinion. So it's actually pretty concerning, Carlos. It's extremely concerning to know that they were spying, that they're playing all these illegal and anti-constitutional games behind the scenes. And again, there's no backlash. I haven't seen any news media apologize for it. I haven't seen any news media retract from their lies and their fake news, especially scum of the earth CNN. And I haven't seen any Democrat officials apologize for this or come out and say, hey, you know what? We were wrong. Yeah, we were spying on the Trump campaign, and we didn't do a good job by holding those in the intelligence community accountable. But again, not only is the media an arm to the Democratic Party, but also entities like the CIA, NSA, and FBI. We know that they work together, in my opinion. From what we've seen in those cases, they work together with the Democratic Party.
Well, and we can definitely see that regarding the Russian hoax narrative that took place with Donald Trump, right? For years, they really muddied his entire presidency. Listen, here's an interesting thought. With everything that Trump did during the 4 years of his administration, right? Energy independent, stock market was up, jobs were up, unemployment was down, median household income was up, GDP, etc., right? With all those, And every step of the way, the left, that includes the media, that includes academia, that includes these federal agencies, that includes, right, obviously the political side. All of these people did nothing but harass him, impede his movements. Imagine if they had actually been fair. I'm not even talking about on his side, just fair and balanced. How much more this guy could have achieved in the 4 years that he was there, and obviously, sure enough, get reelected and for the next 4 years. But he couldn't. He only did so much because every step of the way they were. Do you remember they were even talking about a recession in 2017 or 2018? They were trying to muddy up the economy with scaring people that a recession was coming. Do you recall that?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, it was just part of the propaganda to create the fear, the unnecessary fear about Donald Trump that the economy was going to crash, and he actually had one of the best economies during the presidency in the USA history. So it's absolutely ridiculous, Carlos, how the media and the whole entire system, the leftist system, the whole complex, and that includes Hollywood, or how I like to call it, Peterwood, because it's a bunch of pedophiles, in my opinion, that are running Hollywood. But that's for another segment. Again, the federal agencies that do nothing, in my opinion, but spy on the American people, or political opponents to the democratic machine, the sports and entertainment industry, and of course the rigged media, along with the Democrat Marxist Party. So it's absolutely unbelievable how everything backfired on them. Trump had one of the best presidencies ever, even though he was basically tied down by one hand by the Democrats while still doing lots of work with the other one. But again, it basically came back to backfire them.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the Russia hoax. How did it all start? And at this juncture, we pretty much know that it was a fake dossier, or an unverified dossier that was put together by the Clinton campaign. If I'm not mistaken, they paid Perkins Coie, who hired Christopher Steele, who basically put this stuff together and handed it to the FBI, and the FBI didn't verify it. Didn't go in there. I mean, it was through James Comey's own testimony, where he said it was unverifiable when he was in front of Congress. It was salacious, I think was the exact word. But let's go ahead and listen here to this segment from, I believe it's Fox News.
House lawmakers today rejecting significant limits on warrantless government spying that were championed by both Republicans and Democrats in the House. The House voting 233 to 183 to reject those limits to the so-called FISA program. It would have forced federal officials at places like the FBI to get warrants in most cases before hunting for and reading emails and other messages of Americans swept up under the program. Circa's Sarah Carter saying this is how the FBI was able to spy on the Trump campaign.
I have spoken to a number of sources, one senior law enforcement official and another in the DOJ, and the dossier was absolutely used as part of the FBI's ability to gain a warrant to basically spy on members of the Trump campaign. We know, coming from the mouths of members, senior members of the FBI who testified, both Comey and McCabe, that the only part of the dossier that they were able to confirm that was actually factual was that Carter Page had actually traveled to Moscow. Everything else in the dossier, apparently they did not talk about that. They did not confirm. There are a number of sources that are alarmed about this, particularly people within law enforcement who are concerned that they were using this dossier to find a way to look into the Trump campaign. Very clear on Sarah Carter, and Sarah Carter is awesome. She is a reporter on Fox News. She normally reports for Sean Hannity. And I really do like Sarah Carter's reporting. And as you can see here, and this was back in 2018 when she reported this, confirming all these details about the dossier, about how it's unverifiable, how the FBI used that as a pretext to go in and do all the spying that they did and muddy up everything that they did against President Donald Trump at that time. I mean, it's disgusting. It's honestly what it should not happen in a free democratic country like ours and in a republic, right? It should not be happening. Those are things that you expect to happen in corrupt
places like Venezuela. I mean, you and your sister have mentioned to me how in Venezuela they pretty much frame these political opponents that actually want to help the country and get it out of this socialistic nightmare that they're in. And each time they get set up, they get framed and they get jailed because the corruption there is just ridiculously off the chart.
Carlos, and ladies and gentlemen, we have seen the same steps that the Marxist leftist Democratic Party has taken here in the United States. We have seen them in Venezuela. Well, yes, they have framed political opponents that are pro-freedom, that want the truth out there, and they have put them in jail. So it's absolutely terrifying, and to see what the FBI did, what the Democratic Party did, what the Clinton campaign did by purchasing and buying these dossier and releasing it to the FBI, and the FBI not only they knew that this was a fake, a fraudulent document, and they went along with it as if it was real. Again, this is based on our research on the news, on what's on the internet, but absolutely terrifying, concerning, very anti-constitutional, and the fact that James Comey committed perjury by lying in front of Congress and lying to the American people, saying that he didn't know the details, that he didn't know that this was verified, absolutely inexcusable. So the fact that the FBI and the Democratic leftist party went along with this hoax for 3 years, and they put the country through hell back and forth with this 3 years of unnecessary, back and forth, destroying the lives of anybody around Trump's orbit. Absolutely disgusting how they got away with it. And again, there were no consequences. Rob Mueller finally showed up in front of Congress and provided his presentations on the Nothing Burger, because they had a bun with nothing in it. No collusion was found. That was explicitly, even by a predominantly held team by Mueller, obviously filled with leftist Democrats, with Clinton, lawyers. Even with that rigged council, they still couldn't find anything on Trump, because Trump's clean. We all know that. But again, the left and the media, they want to portray otherwise. So it's absolutely disgusting, Carlos, what happened. Really sad what the Democrats did, because this divided the country even more. This divided, people like never before, and polarized the country like we have never seen in the USA history.
It's really interesting because I remember seeing some of the hearings when Mueller was testifying, and based on the questions that some of the members were asking him, it almost seemed like he didn't know. Like there was a bunch of times where they asked him questions like, "Well, what? I don't know that." And I get it. And Comey did the same thing when he was questioned, but I get why he did it, right? Plausible deniability, right? The more he says I don't know, the less of a corner they put him in, right? So I get it from that. But from Mueller, I mean, for the head investigator to not know things and to seem surprised at some of these questions and seem like he doesn't know was really surprising. But we'll have to save that for another segment. What I really do find interesting is Christopher Steele's, who was the author of the dossier, some of his information that came out. Let me go ahead and bring this up on the screen here. Now, this is from CNN nonetheless, okay? Steele says he used unverified information to support details about web company and dossier. Okay, now here's the interesting part. Remember, guys, when I in our fake news segment, when the left and the right align, you can pretty much bank that it's truthful information, right? Almost all the time. But in this case, right, it says Christopher Steele admitted during a lawsuit deposition that he used internet searches and unverified information to support details he gathered about a web company mentioned in the dossier, according to select pages of his deposition transcript that a federal court unsealed this week. There were a number, now this is specifically about a web company, but there are a lot of things that were unverified and salacious, again quoting James Comey, in the Steele dossier. And it's just amazing how they use this as a premise to get the FISA warrant to do everything that they did to continuously and repeatedly spy on Trump and try to impeach him and take him to court and start this investigation, and all the wasted taxpayer money. How much was it? 450 million, I think, Saul?
Roughly, yeah, ballpark, yep.
It is just unbelievable how they did this to a sitting president. You know, I went on a show, as a matter of fact, on Wednesday this week. It's called a show called Stuck in the Middle by a friend of ours. His name is Osiris, and he talked about how one thing that is undeniable regarding Trump's legacy is how he exposed the deep state. How the media was actually denied. There is no deep state. It's a conspiracy theory. And he actually shows the transition of how they went from, well, maybe there is a deep state, and the deep state is actually good for you. You're going to miss it when the deep state is gone. And it's just mind-blowing how these people are able to brainwash the general audience.
Oh, most definitely, Carlos. I mean, you know, half of the country, if not more, they're just in a trance, and they believe anything that's spewed out by the leftist media channels like CNN, MSNBC, CBS, and obviously the ones in Spanish. But yes, the premises of the entire Russia hoax, of the fake, unverified dossier, it was pretty much everything a hoax, and it's inexcusable how the FBI went along with it. And going back to your last point, yeah, Donald Trump's presidency was one of the best presidencies in the U.S. history.
Yep.
I mean, it's undeniable, and that's him working with one hand while being tied by the Democrats, while they were doing absolutely nothing for the country. Just everything was, let's try to impeach or get Donald Trump on something. But they failed on everything. Like, they have failed in the majority of their policies. But you know what, Carlos, he did expose the deep state at a mainstream media level. Fellow patriots and brothers like Alex Jones on Infowars.com, he had already exposed the globalists and the deep state. Obviously, it hadn't come out until Donald Trump finally broke that dam of fake news and exposed a lie into this rats in the swamp of DC, and that goes for both Democrats and Republicans. So
that's correct.
Don't means that we're just aiming here at Democrats in powers or Democrats, voters. That's never the case. But Donald Trump did expose these illegalities, the deep state, the deep corruption that goes deep in the rabbit hole from both sides of the equation. So obviously, mainly on the Democrat side, but also by the Republicans that are in bed with those Democrats, what we call rhinos. Republicans in name only, because that's all they are. So Donald Trump brought this MAGA, America First / Liberty movement, and that's why they hated him so much. They wanted to silence the truth. They wanted to make him, sound crazy, or that he was a liar or a racist. But you know what? He wasn't racist before he ran for president, when he was financing, causes for the black community in New York and California for many, many decades. He wasn't a racist then. That just shows you how the media is rigged.
Yeah, it really is, and it really does expose. He really did expose their bias. He really did expose their corruption. He really did expose all the things that are wrong with, many of our institutions. Here's a good example. During the investigation, there were 3 people who were heavily involved, and I'm sure our audience knows that by now, which are Peter Strzok, Andrew McCabe, and Lisa Page. You tell me how these people who are anti-Trump, they have text messages of these people communicating back and forth saying how much they hate Trump supporters, smelly Walmart people, etc., and how they have an insurance policy. Yes, the insurance policy. And my goodness, I think Andrew McCabe isn't he like a host or a guest host on one of the leftist news channels? I don't know if it's CNN or MSNBC. I mean, how corrupt. I mean, they should have recused themselves from the moment that the investigation happened and say, hey, look, we can't. But that's not what they did. And so what it does is it jeopardizes the entire investigation, because you have people not trying to look to see what's going on, but they're looking to prove this person guilty. That's not justice. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to let the facts determine the outcome. You're not supposed to manipulate the facts so that you can get an outcome.
Most certainly, Carlos. I mean, these officials that are supposed to be serving the American people and the country in a neutral, non-biased way, they violated their oath to the USA flag. They violated their oath to the constituency, to pretty much everyone in the United States. And they should have taken a neutral approach. Where what happens is, all these officials like Peter Strzok, Andrew McCain, and Lisa Page, they had something, and they still have, I'm sure, they have Trump derangement syndrome, Carlos. And this leftist Marxist, because that's what they are, their wokeism made them do all these illegalities, illegal text messages back and forth between them, talking about insurance policy in case if he won. They already had the setup to frame him. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's out of a movie. And to have Democrats stand by this, and to have the rape biased media defend them and have them on their show constantly, it just shows the hypocrisy. And it's unbelievable how Democrats cannot see through that, how they cannot see that they are on the same channel defending their actions and lying to the American people. It's so disgusting. It goes further to prove that these federal agencies that are compromised big time, and we the people do not trust them. They're pretty much an arm to the Democrat Party.
Right. Well, that's the point that I was going to make, because you're saying how does the Democrat not realize this? Number one, I think you got to separate the Democrat Party or the voter, right? The average everyday voter from the political leadership of that party, right? Those are two different things, because the voter may not see it because they're being fed all of this propaganda, but the political leaders, they absolutely know it because they're in cahoots with one another, right? Everything that they say, they tout, and everything that happens, they defend, and so on and so forth. I mean, and we'll get into that in our next couple of segments that we have, how there's a clear difference between when Democrats do something to when Republicans do something, but we'll save that for the next segment. But now here's what I do want to get into is the impeachment of Donald Trump, right? They tried to impeach him, I don't know, what was it, 2 times? One actually went to the House actually managed to impeach him once the Democrats took control of it over quid pro quo, right? The claim that he basically was asking Ukrainian officials to investigate his political opponent, Joe Biden. And what's interesting is that the facts didn't matter here. Nobody cared, or at least on the left, they didn't care about the actual transcripts in its totality. They do what they always do. They cherry pick certain pieces in order for them to drive the narrative, to drive the outrage, so that they can call to their base and get that support that they need from the general audience. And we have a video. Let's go ahead and play it.
But here's my response. Now, if you weren't fake news, you'd cover it properly. I say to the ambassador in response, I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky, President Zelensky, to do the right thing. So here's my answer. I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing. Then he says, this is the final word from the President of the United States. I want nothing. Thank you, folks. Have a good time. I'm going to bed.
So he's reading from the transcripts themselves, right? But the left didn't care about that. They just focused on the fact that he wanted, or not that he wanted, but he actually commented and said, you should look into these, you should look into this stuff, right? Specifically talking about the corruption that's going on with the Biden family, Hunter Biden, and we'll show that in another segment where there's a video of Joe Biden actually doing a quid pro quo, right? He's telling he's bragging about how he got the Ukrainian government to fire or dismiss a prosecutor who was investigating his son and withholding aid, taxpayer aid from the United States if they did not let him go. And so, son of a gun, right? They fire him and let him go, right? So that's what Trump was referring to as far as looking into these matters, which that is the definition of corruption. If you were, imagine paying somebody to stop investigating your son, right, for whatever it is that he's doing. That's not how the legal process is supposed to work. That's bribery.
Correct. It's the actual definition of a quid pro quo, Carlos. An audience. It's a bribery, basically. No one needs a law degree to know that. So he's literally on video saying the quid pro quo, and the leftist right media has covered him ever since. The judicial system here in the United States has been taken over, in my opinion, by Marxist radicals and leftists, because in any other country that has a legal, neutral system that's applicable, that person that's on video, in this case Joe Biden, should at least be investigated, if not definitely prosecuted for that quid pro quo. That not only is illegal and wrong for those 2 points that you mentioned, Carlos, but thirdly, in addition to that, just the fact that it's taxpayer money he's playing and tossing around with. Yeah. So absolutely unbelievable. It just shows you the hypocrisy of the system, this rigged system that we have that, again, it has their candidates, their officials, little on video lying and putting a quid pro quo, and they just simply get away, Carlos. Simply get away.
So let's simplify this. Let's do it in a simple example. Let's say you get pulled over by a police officer doing their duty, right? And whether you were speeding, you did some type of traffic violation, whatever the case may be, right? And the officer's gonna write you a ticket. And you tell the officer, hey, listen, here's $200. Can we let this ticket go? You're going to get arrested now. You're going to get arrested, So why is he able to do that? Why? Is it because he's Joe Biden and he was the vice president at that time? Or was it because he's a Democrat and is corrupt, and so is the Ukrainian government just equally corrupt because they actually did that?
Both.
So it just goes to show what we're dealing with. And I want this to be very clear, right? These institutions, let me backtrack a little bit, Saul, because I saw some news media, obviously leftists, that are saying that we on the right, who are supposedly pro-blue, right? That we're pro, police officer and law enforcement. Now all of a sudden we're talking against the police officers, and we're calling for violence, and we're calling for a dismemberment of police officers. No. That's not what we're doing, right? That's what they did, right, with their defund the police campaign. They weren't saying, hey, look, we need more training for cops. We need to give them more resources to help them cope with the things. That's not what they were doing. They wanted to completely dismantle the cops by defunding them. We're not talking about the same types of things when it comes to the FBI or anything like that. What we're talking about is we need actual justice. We need fairness. These people, these agencies should not be left-wing. They should not be right-wing. They should be following the law. That's what we're talking about. We're neutrality, correct. And we're not talking about harm on any FBI officers or any FBI agents. What we want is what we're supposed to have, and that is a fair process. Fairness under the law. We're all equal, regardless of our political affiliation, because the only people that attack political enemies are supposed to be dictators and tyrants. And everything, and a lot of things, I should say, that the Democrats do, it's funny that they're called Democrats, seem to be very tyrannical.
I couldn't agree more, Carlos, and again, I second that, what everything they just said right now. Us on the right, with the MAGA, Liberty, America First movement, we're never going to have any threats against our agencies or anything like that. But I agree with my fellow patriot and brother-in-law, Carlos, that yes, we do want fairness. We don't want a bias, prejudice, federal agencies that are just going to aim to attack us, Trump supporters, and politicians on the right only. it's got to be a fair system.
But
it's got to be like.
But it's not
like,
even. It's
like,
not even.
like Lady Justice. It's got to be blind. It's got to be a blind system of justice.
Right, but it's not even
applied.
It's not even Republicans. I wouldn't want them to target Democrats. That's not what the FBI is supposed to do. That's not what these agencies are supposed to do. These agencies are there to help our country out. They're not there to be an arm, an extension of any political party. So if the shoe was on the other foot and Republicans were targeting Democrats, I would not want that. That's not justice. That's not what our country's built on.
Most definitely. Some of their actions lately by both the federal agencies and the Democrat Party, in my opinion, they're going against what the United States of America stands for, which is liberty, freedom, equal justice being equally applied. And that's not what's happening here. So to see all this different shenanigans going on, the quid pro quo, the impeachment, the Russia hoax, they're just trying to go after Trump because they know that he exposes their criminality, their corruption, the deep state, the globalism that's embedded into this nation. That's what they're going after, and it's just not right.
Agreed. And so that brings us to our final example, is exactly what we're in the midst of right now, right? The raid on Mar-a-Largo, the fact that they are claiming that there was classified documents that Trump had in his possession that violated some type of law, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we're not going to get into the specific details because we're not attorneys. I've heard attorneys on both sides of the spectrum plead their case. But I do want to touch on the fact that it took Merrick Garland 3 or 4 days to come out and say anything, which is unusual in my view. Normally these things happen pretty quickly. Hey, we did this, we did that, so on and so forth. It's an ongoing investigation. He took some time to come out with the classified documents, and then somehow the classified documents eventually morphed into now nuclear codes, and that's what the danger is. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, reported by the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken, because we know that they've been credible these past 7, 8, 10 years, right? So it's really baffling the absurdity behind what's coming out and the, I guess, protection that the left does with each other, right? Because now they have to make it seem serious, right? So nuclear codes, oh my gosh, nuclear codes. Trump could be selling these nuclear codes to Russia. Are you gonna really tell me that the man who inspired the MAGA, that built this MAGA movement, was talking about America first and building America and did all these things to put America? You're really gonna tell me that he's now in possibility of selling nuclear codes to our enemy? I mean, it's just so absurd, Saul.
It's mind-blowing, Carlos and audience. I mean, they're laughing in our faces. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, to push this actual conspiracy theories that they're pushing now on nuclear codes and all that. Yeah, are you kidding me? Yeah, from their perspective, Donald Trump's going to be out there, hypothetically speaking, from their perspective, selling nuclear codes to China and Russia. Even though every new incoming White House administration, it's known that obviously they changed the nuclear codes. I mean, that is just a given. And, to see some of our sisters and brothers on the left, some Democrats, to see them fall for this and drink this Kool-Aid, I mean, it's actually pretty sad. It's laughable and hilarious, but besides that, it's sad because they're being spewed all this BS that it's just not real. They're living sometimes in a Alice in Wonderland scenario that it's just not people. It's not a reality. You guys need to try to stop the Trump derangement syndrome a little bit and try to at least get to a neutral stance and look at things from, hey, let me look at it from a neutral. I'm not going to go to the right or to Fox News, but let me step back away from the CNN, who's known to be a liar, and they have caught legally by lying and spewing fake news. You guys should know that. Let me step away and do a little bit more research. It's unprecedented what they did to President Trump by raiding his Mar-a-Lago compound in beautiful Palm Beach, Florida. I mean, this pushes the envelope, Carlos, from a Praetorian Guard type of approach. I mean, this is like a Gestapo type of action by the FBI, which, in my personal opinion, it seems like they're just working with the Democratic Party to go after the Democrats' political opponents, the Republicans, the Trump people, anyone that has been in the Trump orbit. They're getting arrested in airports, shackled, embarrassed. They're taken out at 6 a.m. in their underwear from sleeping. People that are innocent, like Nunez and what is the name?
Roger Stone.
I cannot remember it. Correct. Yeah, Roger Stone. I mean, and multiple other people that have been, in the Trump orbit. I mean, it's obvious what's happening. They're going after political opposition, and that's not good.
No, it's not. It's pretty scary. It's concerning, and that is why the right, we on the right are, and we've been saying this. So the left media is trying to make it seem like all of a sudden. No, we've been saying how corrupt these institutions are. When James Comey left or was dismissed, and the new director Ray came in. When I heard his acceptance speech, I said, this isn't going to change. The guy literally dismissed all of these gray areas that these people were doing, like Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and McCabe and James. He completely ignored that and was like, oh, we're just going to, he made it seem like they were going to continue to do business as usual, which that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting the new director to come out and say, look, we need to recuperate our reputation. We need to go back to the basics, make sure that we have the trust of the American people, go back to being the FBI that we have been regarding integrity and justice and all that stuff. But that's not what I heard from his acceptance speech. So to be quite honest with you, this does not surprise me. What does surprise me though is, or what is going to surprise me is, where do we go from here? How can we move forward thinking that these institutions, that they are unbiased? How do we not freak out and be like, oh my gosh, we're turning into Venezuela, we're turning into Cuba, we're turning into North Korea, we're turning into China? How do we stop that when we cannot trust these institutions?
Carlos, that is a question to be answered, and I will tell you from a personal perspective, if things don't change with those agencies, and they don't stop their Trump derangement syndrome or their attacks on political opponents to the Democratic Party, it's going to take us into an edge, that a very slippery slope that it's not good. I mean, we're pushing actions that are done by Russia, typically by communist China, by totalitarian Venezuela or North Korea. So they should stop all this bias, for a political party. They need to be more neutral, in my opinion, and they need to step back and know, wow, we are amazing agencies that young people look up to, that American people should be proud of having this agency to protect the United States and its citizens. But not go after parents that question critical race theory that is being taught to their kids, and they want to complain in a peaceful way, to their school districts, and send FBI agents to go after these parents, after hardworking Americans that are taxpayers and law-abiding citizens. Absolutely shameful. And for this person from Garland to get up there and then sound like the FBI are the victims of all this, that's what people that know that they are at fault always resort to. Oh no, we didn't do anything wrong. You guys are the meanies. You guys are the mean people that are criticizing the FBI, and they cannot be criticized. And you know what? I do agree to some extent with him, because I personally think that not everyone in the FBI has his same approach, or the approach of the top shot callers in the FBI. There are very hardworking patriots and Americans in those agencies. However, the decisions by those at the top, like Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, or this new character, Garland, it just shows the fact that they are damaging their own reputation. You know, they should be proud that they have, you know, the best law enforcement agency in the world with the best technology. When instead of using that for political opponents to the current party in the White House, the Democrat Party, and even when they weren't in the White House, they were still being compromised to attack the other side of the equation. They should be ashamed of themselves. And in my opinion, there should be a cleansing of these agencies, not in a physical or harmful way. Let me clarify that. But from a perspective when it comes to being apolitical, they should be apolitical. It should be a cleansing and re-education system to their employees at the top, at the bottom, and at the mid-level, to know that, like you mentioned earlier, Carlos, that they should be neutral. You know, they should not have any bias at all, and really tap the crimes that are happening in the country.
Yep.
And, you know, the fact that they need to go after all these people that want to hurt kids, you know, with all the transgender operations and all this insanity that are going on, the open borders, the true crimes that are plaguing mainly Democrat cities, that's what they should be tackling on instead of all these shenanigans.
Well, here's what we'll end with, right? And I want to tell this to the audience, because we've seen these people do this time and time again. They change the goalpost every time you prove them wrong. We saw that with we're seeing that with the economy, right? Remember, there was no inflation. Inflation was only transitory. Oh, it was Trump's tax cuts that led to the inflation, which is mind-boggling that somebody would take that position, but they actually did.
Or Putin's fault.
Right, and then finally it's Putin's fault, right? And so they keep moving the goalpost. We saw that with C-19, right? If you get vaxxed, you're not going to get the virus. Oh, once you got the virus, well, yeah, you know, you need a booster shot, right? And then people were getting the booster and they kept on getting sick. Oh, well, you need to keep getting booster shots, right? You need to get another booster shot, and so on and so forth.
Or the best one, Carlos, I'm sorry to interject, or the best one, I got COVID, but thank God I'm booster, otherwise it would have been better. The result would have been worse. I mean, absolutely insane.
Correct. It's exactly correct. They move the goalpost once they're proven wrong, and they come up with some type of smokescreen to try and justify themselves. I have no doubt that the same thing is going to happen. As a matter of fact, we can see it. We went from classified documents to now nuclear codes, right? What's the next step? What's the next goalpost for these people? I want the audience to pay very close attention. When everything comes out, pay very close attention to how that goalpost moved. Now, my biggest concern is the FBI, and this is according to Trump's attorney, they didn't allow them to be there during the search. They escorted the attorneys that were on site out of the house, and they told the attorneys that they had to turn off the cameras for the property. Why would you turn off the camera now due to all this insurance policy stuff that the FBI has been plagued with? Now I have a question. Did you plant any evidence in there? How can we be sure that you are being honest and truthful? Because quite honestly, you have a shadow hanging over you as the FBI agency. So by doing that, it just further adds to it.
They haven't been honest at all, so that, you know, they do have a really long shadow behind them of distrust by us, by we the people, the entire world, Carlos. I mean, you know, our main enemies and allies, they're both looking at what's going on here, and they know. I mean, the FBI, in my personal opinion, they have been exposed by their cherry picking, by their bias, by their prejudice, and you know, and overall their favoritism towards one party and not the other one. I mean, it's obvious. So, to you know, going back to your point, it's shady that they wanted the cameras off. Why is that? If you're sure of what you're doing and you're doing it in a legal way, like they should be doing it, you know, why be afraid of cameras if you have your agents doing the right job, which was the retrieval of some boxes and documents that at first were classified, even though Barack Hussein Obama took truckloads of thousands, if not millions, of documents to Chicago, and they're probably sitting somewhere in a warehouse in Chicago, but the National Archive didn't ask for that. No problem there, right? Well, or when Hillary Clinton stole I think it was about $15,000 or $18,000 worth of furniture by taking the furniture out of the White House. And this is in the news for those of you that do not believe me or you think that I'm making this up. It's online. You can look it up. It's absolutely disgusting. So for Trump to take, I believe, 15 boxes, even though he tried to follow and was working with the National Archive for the past 6 months to make sure that they had everything back that they needed or that they declassified, it's absolutely mind-blowing, Carlos. They should have just done a subpoena or, like the Trump team said, given them a call to their lawyers and everything would have handed. Well, no, they wanted to humiliate Trump and the Trump family by raiding their amazing, beautiful compound, their mansion, Mar-a-Lago. They wanted to create the scenery, the drama, by having the woke agents outside the gate with the AR-15s, and the sirens in the street, creating the drama. That's what they need. And in my opinion, 3 months out from the primaries, they kind of wanted something big like that because they know that the January 6th, committee, hearings, nobody's watching that. Nobody's paying attention. They know that they have nothing to Trump or Alex Jones there. This is in my opinion. So they needed something to shadow Trump and his supporters at the Republican Party because they know that a red wave most likely is coming if people get out there and vote. And if we have fair elections, hopefully this time around, they know that they're losing the narrative, Carlos. They know that there's a massive awakening going on. People are not buying their BS. Joe Biden's approval of the Democrat Party, it's pretty much one of the lowest ones ever in American history. So they needed something like this, but at the end of the day, God willingly, and in my opinion, this is going to backfire on them because they're not going to find anything on Trump. And, we're going to have great primaries in November. And if everything clears, God willingly, Donald Trump's going to run for a presidency in 2024. And they're not going to be able to do anything about it. And at this point, they just seem scared of him, that they're trying to pick whatever they can. Oh, we're going to get him this time, even though they have failed dozens of times.
Yeah, they're like the Wile E. Coyote trying to get the Roadrunner. Well,
that is a perfect analogy and comparison.
Well, and on that note, Saul, we'll wrap it up for this segment, for this episode. Thank you guys so much for joining. Stay tuned for the next one where we continue to talk about the current events that are going on regarding the FBI, Trump, and so on and so forth. Fellow Patriots, until next time.
Thank you for the Patriots. Great night. God bless you all. Be safe. Ultra MAGA, baby. Let's go, Brandon.
Absolutely.